I'm a big background character advocator, and so I was curious on who played with each other in the second selection. If you finished season 1 of the anime, or read up to chapter 93, you will see all 35 survivors. I want to figure out which of the survivors played against each other in the second selection. As we know, once you complete the 100 goals, you are prompted to move forward in teams of 3, and are ranked on the clear order. However, you only got your ranking after you enter in the team of 3. The ranking on the shirt would be set as a default value, which means there will be less number bias between the players when selecting their teammates. To survive the second selection, the players must have formed teams of 3, where winning their match would result in the surviving team picking up one of the losers. Once winning their matches and finalizing their team of 5, they would play against the 5 World Select players. To actually survive this arc, the players must form the team of 5 without getting eliminated, within a specific time frame. After playing against the World 5, they would assess whether the team would survive and proceed to the third selection, which leads to only 7 remaining teams. Well, we already see the perspective of characters through Isugi's journey, and so we can start there. Before jumping into the remaining 30 players, I want to mention 2 things. Firstly, I used some information from my first video talking about the initial 5 stratums and who played with each other. I used this to give reasoning for why some players may team up and play against each other. In that video, I proposed 3 potential options. I want to quickly mention that I think option 1 was actually more likely than 3, as I do think Kiora was the top scorer in his stratum. And honestly, I'm not sure why I selected the only option without Kiora in Nanase's stratum, but for the remainder of the video, I'll reference this option. Secondly, I'll talk about fodder characters quite a bit, who just fill the role as basically any player. I looked for the most prominent designs and characters that may have teamed up, but I didn't look too hard into these background characters. And since there are 125 survivors, there are too many possibilities to guess the specific randoms correctly, and so I'll only really focus on the survivors. I did give some ranks or randomly generated names to help identify the background characters, but they are just placeholders. For example, in the top 14 we do know rank 6, but the others are just the remaining numbers in the top 14. Like Nishioka's teammate, I refer to him as rank 12, but he could realistically be rank 8, 9, 11, 12 or 14. With that being said, I can delve into the remaining 30 survivors and my prediction on how the second selection completely went down. Since we follow Isugi and know his team were the first clear team, we know every other team finishes after him, and so we can use his journey to map the completion order. There is no wait time for the initial 3v3, and so let's call the first day, Day 1. As soon as the trio teamed up, they instantly decide to battle Rin's team, where they lose and Batra gets picked up. After losing, they enter the loser's gate, and very soon after, Baro and Narahaya enter, implying they lost at a similar pace as Isugi's team. Teams cannot rush once in the loser's gate, and must wait a full 24 hours until their next match, and so we can denote that the 2v2 happens on day 2. On that day, we see Baro get picked up and Narahaya get eliminated. We then see the trio rest for the remainder of the day. On day 3, we see them head to the public baths, where they intend to play against Ryo, Kunigami and Chigiri, where we know it takes another full 24 hours before the next match. And so day 4 morning is when they play their 3v3. After winning the 3v3 and picking up Chigiri, we see Isugi talk to Rin and Batra and decide to play their 4v4. After another 24 hours and on the 5th day is when the 4v4 happens, and after losing and getting picked up by Rin's team, they complete the second selection. Now that we've established a timeline, I can focus on the other characters and their matches. The first trio we are introduced to are Narahaya, Baro and Nishioka. On a side note, since the teams of 3 are usually with players they're familiar with, then you may have wondered, why did they team up? I guess that Narahaya would just ask to team up with Baro and willingly be his servant, with Baro not caring who he played with or against. But Nishioka is a weird one, because he wasn't part of the OG stratum, so why would he join? Well, I'm guessing it's because Nishioka and Baro knew each other prior to Blue Lock. Nishioka is portrayed as Aomori's Messi, and implies he is the best player in that prefecture, and we know that Baro played for Akudo Academy. With a quick search on Google Maps, you realize that Akudo is located in Aomori too, and so I'm assuming they had previous history. So who actually beat these 3? Well, Nishioka was likely one of the best players in his stratum, and Baro was the top scorer too. Those two have the ability to beat any fodder team by skill alone. and so I'm inclined to believe they lost to some of the other 35 survivors. Since they entered the loser section almost at the same time as Izuki, and Chigiri's comment to Kunigami that they haven't seen anyone yet makes me comfortable guessing that Baru's team entered and played against another team with members ranked below 40. If we look at the survivors in this range, there's a few options. I don't think it was Yuki, Otoya or Hiyori for reasons I'll explain later, but what about the other survivors? Well, we know in chapter 44 that Ishikari, Tanaka and Corona didn't form a team yet, and so we can rule them out, as well as the top 15 members besides the bald-headed guy from Nishioka's original team. We also know in the spin-off chapter that both Sakura and Hiragi were standing around Ryo right before Chigiri and Kunigami approached him, meaning they wouldn't have formed a team with other top 40 members yet, and so that leaves two potential survivors, Kiora or Haiji. Well, I think it was both, with Kiora gaining importance in the main story, and his portrayal in the spin-off novel as potentially the top scorer in his stratum, which we also learned recently that he has one of the highest shooting stats in the NEL arc. I think there's a good chance Kiora played against Baru's team. If Kiora and Baru were top scorers, and with Haiji and Nishioka being survivors of potentially similar levels, as we see in the third selection they stomped 5-2 on the same team, however neither making the U20 bench, then it's believable they could defeat Baru's team in a close 4-5 match. As for the third member, I initially thought it would be Sakura, so they could be ranked 19, 20 and 21, but since we see in episode Nagi that it's unlikely him, then I think it would be the bald-headed guy who was in Nishioka's previous team, or a fodder character like Narahaya, like the ranked 31 player we see in the anime, even though the guy with Kyora's jersey number doesn't look like him. And if you watch my first video of who played with each other in the first selection, you'll also realize that I predicted Kiora, Nishioka and Haiji being from the same stratum, which gives actual reason for Baru's team to play against Kyora's. The next teams I want to discuss are Karasu's and Nico's teams. In my first video, I concluded that it's likely that Ayu, Yuki, Otoya, Karasu and Hiyori were teammates in the first selection. With Ayu joining Rin, that leaves 4 of them remaining. Since they need teams of 3, then someone will have to miss out or they have to team up in pairs of 2. I believe that Otoya, Hiyori and Yuki finished before Karasu and decided to wait for him as he was the heart of the team in the first selection. Before Karasu as rank 69 enters, we see rank 63 Nico ask rank 53 Zentetsu to team up. What we also know is that Nico wants to team up with someone easy to communicate with, which fits Hiyori's description. My headcanon is that once Karasu enters, the 4 discuss their options, and we see Nico overhear the discussion and offer Hiyori to join his team, which he accepts, and with that we have 2 more teams being Nico, Zentetsu and Hiyori, as well as Karasu, Otoya and Yuki. I believe that Nico, Hiyori and Zentetsu sharpen their strength the first few days, until they see Nagi, Baru and Chigiri drop. As a result, we see them offer to play against each other. Since we know Zentetsu joins Nagi's team eventually as their 4th member, I believe there's a good chance this 3v3 happened, with Nagi's team winning and picking up Zentetsu, with Hiyori and Nico losing and dropping down to the losers gate. My guess is that with 4 players on Nagi's team now, they offer to play against Kyora's team that defeated Baru originally. After Nagi's team win, Kiora gets picked up as their 5th member, with the remaining 3 getting relegated back down. And with that being said, the second clear team is complete. With the third clear team being so stacked, I believe there's a good chance that they finished 3rd because no team was willing to play against them, seeing as how above they were compared to the other Blue Lock players at that moment. I'm guessing that they were the most dominant team in the first selection over all 5 stratums, and maybe rumours spread deterring teams from playing against them. I'm guessing they won both their matches in a row, picking up Yuzu and Himizu 4th and 5th respectively. I'm guessing that Yuzu, Sakura and a random 3rd member teamed up in the second selection. We see them eat together with Corona, but since Corona is actually good, I don't see Yuzu getting picked over him. And so I don't think they were an original trio, but it was just Yuzu and Sakura. Since they weren't part of Karasu's original stratum, I think it also gives reason for them to select them in their 3rd selection, if they lost to them in their 3v3. I think Himizu had a fodder team. We know he played with rank 115 at a point, but that doesn't tell his full journey. For example, he could win, lose, win, or just a singular win to get a team of 4. Since he was a survivor and selected as their 5th member, I'm guessing it's likely he didn't have any other notable Blue Lock survivors, and just proceeded to lose against Karasu's team, with his other 3 fodder teammates getting eventually eliminated. And so the 3rd clear team is now accounted for. So let's talk about the 4th clear team who personally have the best designs. I'm a firm believer that Nanase and Doji and Sunzaki were teammates in the first selection and formed the trio. I have more reason explained in my other video, but I think they are the second Team Z to survive. That being said, I think those 3 will play against Haichi, Nishioka and their fodder teammate. With them being from the same stratum, may give reason for them to play against each other. Once Nanase's team win, I think they'll select Haichi with Nishioka and fodder dropping down. And that's mainly because if they picked up Nishioka here, then that would mean that Nanase and Hiyori would have to eventually play against each other for Nico's team to pick him up. And since Nanase and Hiyori seemed unfamiliar with each other in the 3rd selection, then I think it's more likely that Haichi got selected. That would mean that Hiragi was the 5th to join the team. We know that Hiragi still didn't have a team once Kunigami walked in, and we do see his teammate ranked 62, and so I'm guessing his original 3 had fairly high numbers. His other 2 members I'm guessing are the sole survivors from the proposed stratum, as they have more prominent designs and didn't see them in the top 50. And so the 4th clear team is complete. Back to Nico's team, and we see they're in the 2v2 losers section, implying that one of Saramadara, Ishikari or Nishioka must have dropped too. As I said before, I think that Haichi was selected over Nishioka, and already in a 2v2 situation, and so it's easy for Nishioka to join as their 3rd member. Of course, there are many combinations like Saramadara being selected in the 2v2, with Ishikari and Nishioka joining later, but for convenience sake, let's just say Nishi got picked up 3rd. As Ishikari and Nishioka were previous teammates, I'm guessing they convinced their teams to play against each other. With 125 survivors, I'm guessing that Saramadara had no affiliation with any other Blue Lock survivor, and his team just lost with him joining Nico's team eventually. As the 5th clear team, any of the 3 could join in any order, but I think it's unlikely that Ishikari or Saramadara had interactions with any other survivor before their matches. As for the 6th clear team, we know that Raichi, Gagamaru and Wanama formed the trio originally, and ended up together, so I think it's fair to assume they won both matches. I'm assuming that Tanaka's team was their first 3v3 match, where I think his team were the other Team W players he survived with in the first selection. Then with Shiguma, I think he had 3 random teammates, especially if he was the sole survivor previously. They could join in either order, but I think Tanaka being their 4th member is more likely since he seems closer with Gakamaru and Wanama. The 7th and final team we know persisted of Shido and Ikiguri, introducing the 2v2 Losers Gate, where we know they lost their first game because Shido got red carded since he got bored and no one made him feel anything. So I'm guessing their teammate was a random high number fodder character, and they also lost to another random team of fodders. After that, we see the 2v2 against Ryo and Kunigami, where we see Shido win and pick up Ryo. As mentioned before, I think Sakura was dropped to the Losers Gate, and so he must have won off screen to eventually be picked up from Shido's team. But since Sakura was on the 7th clear team, that means he couldn't play with any other survivor. Lastly, Corona. I'm guessing had no one relevant on his journey either. We don't see him team up with anyone by the time Kunigami walks in, and his fate is hard to guess since a lot of top players already got picked up and he finished fairly late. I think it's likely that Shido played with one of Sakura or Corona and potentially both in the first selection, which may incite them to play their match against each other. And with that being said, I finished all my guesses on all 35 characters and their teams. With 125 survivors in the first selection, I'm bound to get some characters wrong, especially since most of this relies on Kiora and Haiji being the ones to defeat Baru's original team. There may be other combinations like Sakura or Hiraki being in the original trio, but for now I'll conclude my theory until we see more information from future episode Naoki chapters. With that being said, thanks for watching, Buddha be praised, and subscribe if you haven't.